Good morning. My name is Shauna Sylvester, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Simon Fraser University Morris J. Wosk Centre for Dialogue in Vancouver, Canada. I'm speaking to you today from the traditional and unceded territories of the Tanaka, the Syilx, and the Sinixt people of British Columbia, Canada. And by doing a land acknowledgement, I'm not only recognizing that Indigenous people in BC never signed treaties or ceded their land, but I'm saying I'm a settler on this land, and I'm paying respect to Indigenous people's ideas and philosophy and their influence on my thinking. Today, I've been asked to address the question, how can the renewable energy community drive collective change across sectors? Now, before I answer that, I have a question for all of you. I want you to think of a time in your life when you felt most engaged to take action. What was it that made you feel engaged? For over 35 years, I've been trying to determine how best to engage people, particularly in addressing difficult issues like climate change and equity. And the more I convene and facilitate groups, the more I'm convinced that at the heart of all effective engagement is a sense of belonging. I know that this seems far-fetched. After all, what does belonging have to do with advancing renewable-based energy systems? Well, let me explain. Over the last 5 years, I've been absolutely shocked, disheartened, and dismayed at the number of Americans who have voted and campaigned for Donald Trump. I'm married to an American, and over the last few months, I've been living in the US. The week of the US election, we drove through Washington State to get to the part of British Columbia where I'm currently staying. The moment we left the outskirts of the West Coast and entered the eastern part of Washington State, it was wall-to-wall Trump signs. For 2 days, we couldn't find a Democratic sign, and we were within 10 miles of the Canadian border. The sea of Trump signs is not unusual in large swaths of the states. Over 70 million Americans voted for Trump, and for many of my Canadian friends, that seems completely unfathomable. But to understand Trump's appeal, we need to look closer. There are many people who would argue that Trump's appeal is to our lesser selves. He touches those ideas of us that are stirred by anger, fear, and divisiveness. And I agree. That is definitely part of his success. But I think a bigger part of his success is that he creates a strong sense of community. And while it may not be a community that appeals to my values, it is a community that appeals to many others. In small towns in Eastern Washington, to be a part of the Trump community is to be seen. It's to be respected and to be valued. His rallies rival pre-football game parties with tailgate barbecues, live music, kids' play areas, and costumes. Trump defied the campaign tactics of traditional political strategists, and instead he fought a cultural war. He identified what engaged people, what made them feel like they had a sense of community, a sense of belonging, and he supplied them with a cultural iconography to support this. MAGA hats, flags, t-shirts, and bumper stickers. He told them they were enough. They were great, just the way they are, and anybody telling them any different were elitist, cappuccino-sipping, woke socialists who were trying to take away their way of life to make way for outsiders. Rather than outlining policies or plans for how he was going to do anything, Trump took a page from evangelical preachers in focusing on culture and belonging. I want to make it clear that the values that Trump espouses are not mine, and I'm disgusted by the man and his corruption. But many Americans see him as a savior, a leader who restored their sense of belonging and pride, who recognized the contributions they were making in their communities, and who painted a vision for a U.S. that was both reminiscent of a glorious past, a time I might argue never happened, but was also hopeful about the future. Make America great again. To dismiss Trump as a clown or an insane despot is to miss the power of his capacity to shift systems. Now let's look at the renewable energy movement. We use terms like structural shifts to renewable-based energy systems, net zero, decarbonization, green infrastructure. We're focused on technology, systems, energy, and innovation. Think about it. These aren't warm and fuzzy cultural terms. They're technical and cold. When we talk about renewable energy, where are the people? Sometimes you see them as small, little people in a field with a big windmill in the background. Sometimes they're assembling a solar panel. Sometimes there might be somebody in a hard hat looking at a district energy system. But generally, they're ancillary to the technology we are profiling. So if we want to consider what is going to drive change across sectors, we need to go back to what sectors are made of. They're made of people. And we need to know what motivates people and what drives them to change. Again, go back to the question I asked you. What drives you? What engages you? As I said earlier, I think people want to feel like they belong, that they're valued and respect who they are and what they do. And so much of what we deliver in the climate change movement is calling out and shaming. I know the REN21 community is different because the focus is on innovation and solutions. But do you really reach people who are not part of the renewable energy movement and actively engage and invite them in? I want to profile two stories from the SFU Morris J. Wass Center for Dialogue that demonstrate relationship-based cultural movements for change. Both are from within our climate solutions team. The first is Clean Energy Canada, led by our fellow Maren Smith. Clean Energy Canada recognizes that to transition to a clean economy, we need to reach people where they're at and co-create the clean energy transition with, not for them and their communities. Miners, farmers, loggers, carpenters, welders, all are critical to the successful clean energy transition. But they don't align themselves with this movement because really nobody's invited them in. So many are on the receiving end of attacks, like being polluters, dinosaurs, or backward traditionalists by those that they would characterize as elitist, educated, urban-based environmentalists. Sound familiar? Clean Energy Canada has developed a program called Industry 2.0 that focuses on working with people in traditional resource extraction communities to co-create and advance green transitions. The focus of Industry 2.0 is unlocking the capacities of each of these sectors and profiling their contributions to a cleaner future. In Canada, for example, Borden Mine is one of the first electric-operated mines. It now has better working conditions for miners, better health outcomes, and cheaper operations. There's an opportunity to work with companies like Borden Gold Mine to bring them into the green transition movement by profiling their contributions and success stories. Clean Energy Canada is just getting underway with this plan, but they're already under some critique from their INGO partners who critique them from working with big extractive industries. But Maren and her team recognize that building a low-carbon, clean energy future requires building bridges, keeping communities whole, elevating the status of workers from those sectors as part of the green movement, and creating the decarbonized goods that will sustain those communities over the long term. Second example I want to profile is moving in a livable region. This started 6 years ago as a standing dialogue among Metro Vancouver transportation players who really wanted to address how to finance transit. Now it's a table of very odd fellows. It's transportation authorities, mayors, business, health, and union leaders sitting down with real estate developers and environment and community activists. And they're all advocating for both regional transportation and land use planning solutions that advance health, equity, economic development, and climate solutions. I facilitate this group, and we use dialogue and education to build our collective understanding. And every meeting is designed intentionally to build a collective culture based on reciprocity and respect. And some might think that this group should be at each other's throats. It isn't. They're actively working together to create long-term solutions that address climate issues while looking at the co-benefits of stronger economic development, better health outcomes, and greater equity. So what's at the heart of all of these stories? People, relationships, and culture. And what do we need to drive these initiatives? Well, I think we need leadership. So I want to shift to talk about what kind of leadership we need to drive collective change across sectors. And there are, I think, 5 core competencies. We need leaders who are first relationship focused. They have the capacity to see that we are better together, that people matter and their needs matter. It's understanding that we need to nurture ecosystems of change. We need leaders too that are conveners, that are able to facilitate, design processes that enable groups to learn from each other, share, engage in authentic dialogue, and co-create solutions. We need 3 bridge builders. These are the people that have cultural intelligence. They have empathy, curiosity for others. They listen to understand and bridge to what people care about and what they need. 4th, we need leaders who actually understand the arc of engagement. I can't tell you how many climate change solutions I've seen where we say we're going to deliver the right message to the right audience at the right time, and that's going to lead to behavior change. It doesn't work that way. People need to go through a process of understanding an issue. They need to learn about it, to be educated. And it's at that point where they look at the trade-offs in relationship to their own values that they are engaging. At the point in which they can sit down at the dinner table and say, this is what I think about an issue, that's the point at which they can move to advocacy. And it's not until that point is reached that they can then move to action. The 5th core competency is one I've come to think about a lot since COVID started. This pandemic has entered our lives and we find ourselves living through a long emergency. So right now, I think one of the most important core competencies for leaders is that they have resilience intelligence. What do I mean by that? Resilience intelligence is the ability to face ambiguity and be open and try new things. It recognizes that we're working in a really complex environment where we can neither predict what's going to happen next, nor do we have a consensus of how to move forward. Resilience intelligence recognizes that we're on a marathon, and leadership requires us to know as individuals and institutions when we need to ebb and when we need to flow. Whether we have the capacity to step up right now or whether we need to practice self-care, take a step back and let others step in. Resilience intelligence relies on working with others to build our collective intuition and to create a space of learning and be open to inspiration, creativity, and collaboration. This actually might be a time for artists to take our leadership from artists. People who build their resilience intelligence muscles generally recognize the value of diversity. They are people who can help transition themselves out of seeing the cup half empty to seeing it half full. I know that the people who are involved in REN21 have high resilience intelligence. You can embrace ambiguity, you embrace complexity, and you can help others transition out of this mindset of scarcity to collaboration by showing other possibilities. After all, isn't that what's at the heart of the renewable energy sector? So one of the wonderful things about REN21 community is that you're dreamers, you're builders, you're implementers. And I want you to now think back on that question I originally posed. What made you feel most engaged to take action? Now think deeply on what might engage others to join you. This is a time when your curiosity about engagement, your curiosity about people, your interest in collaboration could create the culture for driving the change this world needs. While I know you need to think about systems, technology, and innovation, you are not a sector. You're a community of people with a culture, and you get to decide how inclusive, expansive, and resilient that culture can be. Thank you.